Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. Today I want to talk about the budget, cover some of the information that's out there on the budget, some of the things that have been reported, and why it's sort of off when people start talking about fixed budgets and things like that, and that the most of it isn't really based on some predefined number, but there is some basis to work out how much United will spend. Basically, the way you have to look at it is that United would not like to increase expenses. Over the years, revenues will slowly increase year over year with sponsorships. There's a new international TV deal, other things as well. But they would like the expenses as far as, player wages to not dramatically rise, and the overall expenses on, paying for transfers, amortized, and things like that to not increase dramatically. Basically, the point is that United have historically, since the Glazers have owned it, tried to maintain kind of an even ground where they don't lose money. Not like a lot of smaller clubs that constantly lose money and have to get kind of bailed out. United like to stay around even or have a little bit of profit. This keeps profits there, keeps share price high. It's just really the way that United is run. They like to keep things kind of level between expenses and revenue, so that they have losing a little money here or there, usually not, and often maintaining some profit. Right now, the wages at United are very high, highest they've ever been, and that's usually the biggest indicator of spending ability, but this summer they're due to drop significantly. One thing to make a note of is that the Europa wage cuts mean very little, as it's essentially a wash between lost Champions League income and wages. There's little difference financially between the two competitions in actuality. From an accounting perspective, you lose a little bit of money from not being in it and from being in Europa instead of Champions League, and you save about 50 million on wages in terms of all the pay cuts that go with it. So, but let's look at it here. It was reported by Samuel Luckhurst that they're due to clear about 50 million in wages just from the free agents in a year. So what does that actually mean? If we take a look at the wages here, you have the main ones. You have Mata, Pogba, Lingard, Cavani, Matic, and I have Phil Jones on there, as he's probably going to go for basically for free, even though he's not a free agent. And you can see it saves about 50 million a year in pounds in wages. So how does that work? Well, I'm going to pull another graphic up here that will kind of show you how this happens. You're saving about 50 million a year. So from an accounting perspective, how do you keep the expenses from rising over that 50 million a year? If you take a purchase of a 50 million pound player, just use nice even numbers, who's on 150K per week wages, about 7.5 to 8 million a year in wages. The purchase is amortized over 5 years. That simply means on the books, it's counted as 10 million per year over 5 years as an expense. And it's often paid that way too, but whether it is or it isn't, doesn't really matter. It's still put on the books, 10 million a year for 5 years. So that's 10 million in transfer fees, 7.5 or 8 million in wages, just for simple math. Add in some bonuses, let's call it 20. That's what goes on the books this year, 20 million. The purchase half, the wages and bonuses the other half. So from the 50 million player purchase, you're adding 20. A 60 million purchase like Nunez on similar wages would be close to the same. So when you're saving 50 million a year, you can put one 50 million pound purchase in there, adds 20. Another one adds 20, and then you have 10 left, so that's about half, right? So you're talking about 2.5 50 million purchases, or about 125 million in spend. And that's probably the closest budget estimation that's possible. Just from free agents alone, 125 million spend keeps the expenses about even, if that makes sense, and means that United won't increase overall expenses. There's other factors that will increase spending, like, there's probably transfer fees from years past that are not being paid anymore, amortizations that are coming off. And when those are finished or dropping, that increases decreases expenses, but we don't know. So let's just work with this 50 million number and assume that. So 125 million is likely your budget just from free agents alone. or around there. It's not going to be exact, but that's the point. How much wages are in there, what kind of bonuses, these can change this a little bit. But you're thinking with around that 125 million. Now, if you add sales to it, let's take a look at our sales here and see who's likely. And obviously, we're just going to look at the most likely ones, and then we'll, see what happens. So we've added in here. Let's see. We've added in Pereira, Tuanzebe, Martial, and Bailly as the most likely sales. Could there be more? Of course. You could have Tellez go. You could have Van de Beek go. You could have Henderson go and replace him with another goalkeeper. These are all possibilities. But let's assume those as the most likely. Pereira, Tuanzebe, Martial, and Bailly, players who are all reportedly on their way out. From that, you're going to save another 26 million in wages, and you're going to raise about 57 million in sales. So remember, the sales, much like the purchases, also have to be amortized because they're not being paid to United over in 1 year. But well, I should be clear about this. Sometimes sales are counted immediately. They just say we take all this now, but for the sake of discussion, let's count it over the 5-year period that it's going to be paid to United most likely, just because it works a bit better that way to think with the budget. Otherwise, people think, 57 million in equals 57 million spent. And yes and no, but for different reasons. So if you add in those sales and you add 25 million a year in wages and 57 million in sales, and you amortize the sales, it's about 11 million a year. Plus the 25, there's another 36. So that allows for almost 2 more 50 million players. So what you're thinking with is, with sales, you could see almost 225 million in purchases with about 60 million in sales. That's what could happen without even increasing the expenses at United, which is important because that's how the Glazers operate. So the first scenario is you're likely to see about 125 million spent. A striker, a defensive midfielder, or a center back, or both, depending on the prices of each. If it's, say, like a Timber for 30 and a Phillips if they get relegated for 25, plus Nunez, you get all of that with the 125. Then sales come in. Then you could see another 2 or 3 30 to 40 million players brought in on that basis. So 2 or 3 signings, add some sales in, you likely see 2 or 3 more. So that's why you can get that number of between 4 and 6. People who are pessimistic about it will say it's going to be 4. People who are optimistic say we get all those sales done and get 6 signings coming in. But that is how the budget works. That's how you can sort of figure out. That's how you can sort of figure out the way that the expenses are being done. Otherwise, there's not a ton of news. I've asked about Ignacio, but if it's true, it's outside my view. I only heard of Newcastle. From what I've heard, still Timber and Pau Torres are priorities for the center back position, and perhaps it's another one on the list to add, maybe scouted, looked at, something like that. If it happens, I'm not going to deny it. I'm just saying if it happens, it's sort of outside of my view of things. On Nunez, there's word from France he's a PSG target, and this is true, but based on what we've heard and what's been reported, he should prefer England based on everything, and bringing Mendes agency to help negotiate and all of that. I think PSG were looking at Amin Gouiri in France to bring in as their primary target. On another striker front, Bild today state that Nkunku will re-sign if Leipzig secure Champions League. I think they need a draw or the team below them to draw or lose in order to secure it on the final match day. So it looks more likely, as discussed prior, that he's going to re-sign with a release clause for next year. The only other thing is that United are looking to bring in an analyst for recruitment, so they're obviously restructuring and shuffling there and adding to the analytics department. So if you're interested and have experience and possibly a degree in sports science, make sure to go and apply for that if it's an interesting job to you, and don't forget to keep in touch. Anyway, I hope this video was informative. I'll try to keep you in the loop on any other news that comes up. Make sure to watch the youth final today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Ajax can secure their league title today, which should very much accelerate things as far as Ten Hag and discussions with United and plans for summer. It's going to be a while till United can finalize their league position, but hopefully most things can be lined up in the meantime for that. So Yeah, thanks for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.